All right, Russell, thank you for coming on to the podcast. I certainly appreciate this.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the invite. Always happy to talk shop.
Yeah, no doubt. So we have a lot of sellers come on the show. Not a ton of not a ton of
Hey, hey,
analytics
hey.
people that have.
Everyone sells.
Everyone sells.
Everyone sells.
You've
So,
actually told that to me multiple times, so I should know better than saying that right now. But I thought this was really important. As one of those people the industry looks to as a leader in the analytical space. I want to have a conversation. We talk a lot about taking a step back at this time and analyzing what we do. So I want to have that conversation here because I think it's really valuable. So, having been around sports in the industry for a long time now, in multitude of roles, what can or should a sports sales rep be doing from a non-selling point of view right now that they have this moment?
I mean, there's a lot of things they can be doing. I mean, there's no shortage of tools out there that are designed to help support the salesperson. And just because situations might be different doesn't mean those tools don't still apply. So, I think one of the things that still, I think, gets underutilized is pipeline preparation, right? Like using the tool, whatever it is, Salesforce, Microsoft, whatever, Core, SSB, whatever system that you have in place that helps you manage your pipeline and your relationship with your customers is still incredibly valuable right now. Being able to look back at who you've closed, when you closed them, why you closed them, who you lost, why you lost them, looking at all the conversations, the campaigns or things that were assigned to you that you were going to go and work on, that you still are at some point. Like, you can still almost kind of map out, like, who do you prioritize? There are people that still want to have conversations. So I think in terms of what they can be doing, it's setting themselves up, right? Making sure that they're looking at that information and it's as accurate as possible, because the thing that you want to be right now is as efficient as possible. So the more accurate that information is and the more comfortable you are with using it, like, this is also a great opportunity to kind of teach yourself and go, I wonder if I can make my own lists. I wonder if I can, view this information a little easier, having conversations with whoever's managing the CRM. Like, this is just getting that to be the best well-oiled machine that it can be is incredibly important for reps to be thinking about right now.
So you said a word, efficient and, efficiency. What does that mean in sales? So I think we always talk about trying to be more efficient in what we do every single day, but we don't actually do a really good job of that in the sports business industry when it comes to individual sales reps and how they go about their job. So what does efficient or efficiency mean to you in terms of how a sports business sales rep should see it?
So it's funny, there's efficiency, there's personal efficiency, and then there's kind of almost departmental organizational efficiency. And so at the BI layer, we probably put a lot of energy into departmental organizational efficiency.
Yes.
Right? What can I do to identify the best leads, assign them at the right time to the right people? What are the triggers that we want to incorporate? So I've always told sales, my job is to make everyone better at their jobs. So I'll be looking at their live analytics plan score, or when did they click on the email or not, or whether they visited the website, or what the conversion rate would be for different leads at different times, and using all of those different levers to look at everything holistically. But then eventually there's a handoff, and then everything gets handed out and distributed. And now you have this idea of individual efficiency. Yep. So I'm going to make phone calls. I'm going to send emails. What are the things, like, what are the 3 or 4 pieces of information I want to always make sure I look at first? And so what is the user experience like? Making sure I really understand where everything lives so I can do my quick glimpse and know my 3 to 4 key talking points. And if there's data in the system that I don't know, get educated on it so I can make sure I use it properly. So there's your research efficiency when I look at a customer.
So real quick, I'm totally going to cut you off there because I think this is really important.
I tend to ramble.
You're good. I think in sports business, we tend to let the client lead the conversation a little bit too much. Whereas in most other ways that we interact in sales in 2020, we're actually being driven by the intelligence the organization has on us. So for example, I use this I got a Maren Morris vinyl album a little while ago, and Amazon has hit me with like 3 separate emails about my buying influences and what should be done since. What are some of those 3 to 4 things a rep should look at? And I mean, you can be second on that. And I'd say the first question is, it's okay for a rep to lead with that information, right? Like the information that we already know about a client. I think historically we haven't. My argument is that's how everybody's trying to sell to us now. Why are we lagging behind?
You still need to be careful with the second part. Let me hit that part first.
Please.
Not everyone really realizes the extent of data that's being captured, you know, and it's getting out. I mean, there's data privacy laws, and I'm not going to turn this into a privacy, you know, conversation. That's a can of worms we don't need to touch on this, you know, episode. Sure. But, you know, there is, you know, to know that someone happened to visit the webpage, that, you know, visited the group's ticket page, and they visited it 3 or 4 different times, you know, by all means, you should talk about and find out if they're interested in group tickets. You know, but consumers have a different understanding of where that data lives, how accessible that might be, how it's used. It's all on your terms, but there's still you have to avoid the creepy factor. Yeah. So I tend to not be overt with that stuff. I tend to, you know, use it to naturally guide the conversation to where you expect it to have the most success. So that's what now, if someone submits a form, if someone does a very clear action, I submit a form, I clicked on 7 links in an email, like something that is clearly the consumer is taking very, very clear, deliberate actions. Those are the opportunities where you can get a little more, and you should. If someone submitted a form, like, hey, I saw you said this in the comments, I saw you pick this, like, be as direct as possible, because the consumer has raised their hand and told you where to go there. It's the other stuff like the lead scoring, the demographic profile, some of the other general digital behavior that I would not be overt with.
I agree on the digital behavior stuff. That stuff gets creepy, like especially like, oh, I see that you make this amount of money a year. Like that's not a good way to connect with someone. I'm talking a little bit more about the information. Like, we know what game you came to. We know where you sat when you came to the games, and using that to help spark and lead the conversation. That's
absolutely, because that is a very clear, I transacted, yes. I bought. You know, you can even something like, so the ticketing one is the most obvious. You can definitely say, hey, the last time you came to a game, I saw you sat in section 103. What did you think of the view from those seats? 100%. Even if they didn't buy, if they had the tickets forwarded to them, that's 100% transparency. Everyone's going to be comfortable with that. And it shows, you can absolutely leverage that. Even indirect transactional, someone buying things from the shop. If someone attended a game and you say, hey, I noticed, you tend to bought jerseys from this player. We're honoring him at this game, or like if there's ways that you can tie it in, by all means, because the transactional nature makes it much more clear that the consumer knows you know this. And I'm just saying, in a lot of ways that we connect now is digital too. So, potentially, sending them a picture of that player, if you know the jersey, or highlights from that game is a great way to really kind of cut through that clutter that maybe, a phone call doesn't get picked up, or, a traditional email that's really long and a lot of literature doesn't get opened. You can really personalize and customize what you already know about that person. That's in that transactional way that you talked about, that could be really engaging for the client to make sure that they understand that you recognize them. 10 years ago, what we're talking about might have felt really creepy, but now there's this expectation that me, cater to me. Yep. And that actually ties nicely back to the personal efficiency part. And I'll come back to the questions about which data points, but just to hit on that, how much time you as an individual decide to spend on personalizing the email and the outreach and those things. Like, the marketing team is going to be doing that at scale. But of course, as an individual seller, you're going to want to do things, but who you decide to spend that level of time on is an opportunity to kind of implement some personal efficiency, right? Let's take something like one of those data points would be something like a live analytics plan score. Are you an A, B, C, or D? That tends to have some really strong correlations to conversion rates. And so, when I talk about this, even in like my classroom, not all of your buyers are A's. This is not a rational purchase. You're going to get buyers from B's, C's, and D's. You can't ignore them, but I can decide how much time I'm going to spend chasing an A versus chasing a C, how much time I might spend putting effort into personalizing and really targeting that A versus C. There's actually a trend in B2B marketing called ABM, account-based marketing, for companies that are selling to businesses, probably very applicable for suites and sponsors, right? So account-based marketing, when you have a really, really well-tuned target list of the top 50 to 100 people, you're going to spend an abnormally amount of percentage of time personalizing everything that you're going to communicate to that person. As soon as you scale to things like season tickets and things where you've got a larger pool, those tactics, you need to scale those tactics down because you have a volume thing you need to stay efficient with.
Yeah, even if it's a volume thing you need to stay efficient with and you get a set of leads, you should absolutely look at the scoring that you get from your business intelligence to help direct you in terms of the calls you should be making. But then you can also, knowing your personal history, be scoring the leads yourself. So if you're scoring the leads of the leads you're given, some of that stuff shouldn't take a ton of time, but I do think it speaks to being smarter about the calls that we make, as opposed to, getting a list from our manager and just calling straight down the list. We can take a few seconds to be thoughtful and saying, I'm getting 300 names right now, because we tend to give them to reps in an incredible amount. A rep should take 15, 20, 30 minutes to be able to say, all right, these people came to this amount of games. They spent this amount of money when they came. We know some other information about some of their purchase habits or where they've been on the website. I think using those things to be thoughtful about how you make those calls and who you prioritize from a call standpoint is going to make us better salespeople.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending, every BI department works a little differently in terms of how granular they assign those audiences. Yeah. I tend to, some campaigns I've run, towards the end of last season were very clear in terms of multi-game, this spend level, this average spend per ticket. Like, I was using kind of the different kind of buckets of what their spend patterns were. So if I gave you 100, these all 100 have some pretty good attributes in common. So I'm not giving you 500 and you got to figure out which ones. And so if you're in a spot where maybe you're not getting that more targeted lists and they're too large or a little too broad, that's a good opportunity to have a feedback loop with your BI team. Because either there might be a reason why they're doing it that way, because there are pros and cons to how big or small you make your audiences and how you track things. So there could be some reason why, in which case you're spot on. Take the list and spend a little bit of time breaking it down yourself, or the BI team may actually decide, sure, if that's going to help our sales team be more efficient, now we can take that back and scale it better for the whole department rather than putting that work on every individual.
And so I think this ties back to what are those 3 or 4 points, but we're going to have some people listen to this that don't even have a BI team in their organization. And so I think what will be really helpful, like we talked about, is whether or not you have a BI team or not, what are some of those 3 or 4 things you should really be looking for?
Sure. I'll break it down in kind of a couple different categories, because you're right. And I don't know if there's folks in the minor leagues, folks in major leagues, and knowing that there might be a different spectrum, not everyone can have the same resources in terms of the data available.
I have a very diverse audience.
Yep. I believe that. So, a very common thing is something like live analytics or a data append provider. So in teams, this is kind of standard operating procedure. Minors maybe a little more hit and miss. But if you have a data service like live analytics, or it used to be Turnkey Prospector, or any of those kind of, either just get Axiom data. What are the couple of, how much can this person, do they look like a season ticket holder, right? In live analytics, the best thing to do is to say your plan grade. If you don't have a scoring, or if you're maybe someone built a model in-house. So anything that looks like just a simple grade or scoring mechanism, that's number one. If you don't have that, but you have some demographic data, you do want to take a quick look at something like a household income, a net worth. I tend to look, if you have discretionary income index, I tend to like that one because it actually kind of highlights, how much you can really spend on something you don't need. So high DII, 100 is average. Anything over 100 starts to show someone that's got some discretionary spending. So, and then depending on the types of products you're moving, if you're selling packages, like you're selling mini plans, you're selling theme nights, you want to look at maybe data points that are most relevant for the particular type of product. So you can look at things like gender and age and presence of kids and some things that just help you know what product might fit the person. So you got scoring, you got a couple demographic points. Ideally, you want hope that your email and maybe your website tie in as well. So digital behavior, have they visited the website? Have they clicked on a form? Have they done anything there that essentially, that's almost like a recency trigger. If you click or you submit or you view something, you're top of mind right now. So that essentially tells you should prioritize and act quicker because someone's thinking about this. And then the last piece, which I probably should have been the first, sometimes I get too into the cooler the stuff, is the ticket history. Look at what they bought in the past. Look at their total lifetime spend. Look at what seats in the building they like to sit in. Look at what games they've attended. That transactional history is so rich to your examples earlier, how it can be personalized. That is the most important starting point because you don't have to necessarily do product education. You can get right into the personal experience and make it more emotional out of the gate. Versus some of the other hoops you might have to go to for someone that doesn't have some transactional history.
Yeah, obviously I love the last one, but I also love the interaction with the website because some of the sales reps' most beautiful words they hear is I was just on your website today, or I was just on your website yesterday, and that is obviously a huge indicator of purchase. I'm a big fan of people that have bought merch too, and including that tie-in because. My thought is always if they're buying a jersey for your team, what are the chances that they're not going to try to come back to
merch? You have to be careful. Merch, I like when merch is a complimentary purchase and not the only purchase.
Not the lead purchase.
It shows multiple interactions with the team. Because merch purchase could be a merch purchase for someone else when it stands by itself. You tend to gift more there. And the price points are significantly different compared to maybe tickets. So it's a great complementary purchase and often it can give you the ability, maybe you haven't done any demographics, but if you know what they bought, that starts to help you imply some other demographic pieces of information. So I do think it's a good complementary point.
Yeah, totally. You talked earlier about, teaching yourself and making your own lists. Talk a little bit more about that because I genuinely believe, and this is from some of my experiences, that self-prospecting and reps who create their own lead lists have always been, to me, among the most efficient that we've ever had. I think back to all the best salespeople that I've managed or I've coached, and I would say almost to a person, they generate more sales themselves than they do from anything that we actually go ahead and assign them.
So I'll disagree a little bit on this one, but I think we might find a middle ground. Yes. So there's a team I know that ran an experiment in the past to kind of vet out this concept. I will say one of the things I love about salespeople, and listen, I'm going to put myself in that bucket. My company I was with the last 5 years, I was on more than my share of outbound sales demos efforts. So I'm there in the fight. I will say sales people are very confident in their capabilities, and they should be. You need to have confidence,
yes,
and no, you need to you need to be your own biggest advocate for yourself for what you're selling. It's a skill and a trait that aligns typically with successful sales. So, but sometimes that expands into other areas.
I would say confidence, not arrogance. Is
confidence. That's of course. Like I said, this is all complimentary. I'm having fun here.
Yes.
So when this one team did was because they had gotten similar feedback, they said, all right, here, well, let's divide our sales team up into 2 groups, and you guys will self-prospect, and this group I'm going to assign. And they kind of let them go, did everything you could to kind of manage the experiment equally, and not let anything skew. And the self-prospectors did not do as well as the people that had the leads assigned, because the problem is certain things don't scale. Like there is the efficiency issue. So the more time that you spend looking at individual people and trying to make these decisions, and think about it, on one customer, you could have 100 pieces of demographic information. You could have all the data things we just talked about.
Yep.
How are you going to sift through hundreds of thousands of people to identify that? Now, if it's been pared down, so this is where we're going to get to the middle ground. If it's been pared down, and we've already gone through different levels of filtering at the scale level, and you have the 500 people or the 300, things like that, then yes, within that, because we've now kind of, essentially it's like you put your blinders on. Now you can drill in and look for the things that you find you have the most individual success with. and use that to focus and prioritize. And that's where I think you can have some success there. On the self-prospecting side, the area where I think salespeople can have really good success tends to be on more of the B2B type of sales.
100%. I agree with that.
Because B2B data, fundamentally, there's just not as much data that you can use to model and profile at scale. And there's all these other mitigating factors in terms of why someone may want to utilize tickets, finding the person who happens to be the small business owner, who happens to be the fan of the team. Like there's all these other little moving parts that a one-on-one someone who's doing their own prospecting and research. That's why you see things like LinkedIn Sales Navigator being so much more popular now, because it really supports the more sophisticated B2B prospecting that a seller can do really well with. So that's where I would also kind of divide the line. Like B2B prospecting, absolutely. I want to empower my salespeople with tools, versus the larger consumer base. I want to use the data to funnel down versus letting someone have to sift through it.
So that I will say, when you talk B2C, I believe 100% you're right, that you need to be working with business intelligence. The couple ads that I would add to B2C is, I think, when we talk about some self-prospected leads that we pick up on game day personally from people that we interact with, tend to be really good leads because of the face-to-face presence we have. People you get at networking events, or I made a couple, I sold to my barber in Columbus, and, I sold to someone when I was walking down the street in my Dynamo jersey when I was here in the Heights in Houston. So, I think some of those, you can't replicate that individual connection with business intelligence that you do in those places. So that's where I would say, some of the best reps that I've had on the B2C side, that's where they got a lot of their leads, was the networking they did, the referrals that they did, a lot of that stuff. But I would agree with you otherwise. I believe those people also need to get leads, and they need to be thoughtful about the leads that they're calling when they get them from business intelligence, or doing their own kind of business intelligence, like we talked about on that side. And I couldn't agree more on B2B. You did talk about this a little bit though. So taking a look back at your pipeline from a B2B standpoint, what are some of the things that you can learn about yourself as a salesperson when you take a look back at your pipeline on the B2B side? Because I think this is really important, because I think self-prospected leads in businesses, if you have no track record, that's a decent start. But I think when you have some track record, I think we can be much better as an industry about using the data of a sales rep that's been in place for a year or two, about directing them towards who they should be spending their time on from a B2B standpoint.
Got this. The data that reps can generate by proper use of a CRM, and then you let that scale across. Multiply that by 10, 15, 20 salespeople, multiply that over 1 or 2 years. Yes, all you're doing is, and this is why it's very important, the acronym GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. The utilization of the CRM has so many impacts, has impact on you individually and what you can do, but it has an impact on the data that then we can analyze to help set you up in the future. So yes, everything that has been done on an individual B2B prospecting side, captured, structured. We look at what industries those companies were part of. We look at the time of year when we were contacting them, what products converted, what products didn't convert. Then you can really start making some really good, inferences on what else, where should we try to go find more business leads? Which ones should we recirculate? Here's an important one that sometimes is just as important. Which one should we not recirculate, right? Another great example, sometimes if you capture the reason why someone doesn't buy, there are certain reasons that you will never, ever overcome. And if you can filter those out, that's at a basic level. Now you're going to spend more time on the things that you actually have a chance to close. Yep. So absolutely, it's valuable to help make decisions and recirculate the right businesses at the right time. And if you're thinking about it, forget about at scale, even if for yourself individually, looking back at your own wins and losses, like everyone needs to self-assess. Everyone needs to go, all right, what industries have I personally had success with? Why did I close them? Are there talking points I'm missing on these other industries? Let me go talk to my colleagues. Where are they having success? Can we learn from each other when we're having, strengths or weaknesses in certain areas? And same way I said reasons, people that you don't want to go after again. Same thing at the individual level. Who should I have given up on? There's only so many hours in the day, and it's easy to say, yeah, second best thing to a yes is a no. but no one likes to actually go ahead and put in that it was a no. But if you go back and look at your own pipeline and your wins and your losses, you'll hopefully see, man, I let this opportunity out there for 5 months. Like, you know, where can I, like, are there things where I should just move on because it's going to let me spend my time in places where I have more of an opportunity? So that's how I would look at it from kind of the individual level. And again, all that stuff rolls up into what we can do when you look across the entire sales team.
That's awesome. And it's funny you mentioned that because, you know, one of the things I always tell reps is, you know, at some point, you know, the intelligence that you get and being analytical has to give way to what's in your heart. So, and I always tell reps is, you know, that moment when all of a sudden you're looking at the name of someone you had a good conversation with that you liked, that for a while you're like, no, if I just get him back on the phone. And then that one morning you wake up and, Russell, I don't like you anymore. Like, that's the moment that's our body saying, like, and everything we know about humans being like, no, it's actually time to get away from them. Like, they are actively avoiding us and we know it. Like, we know that from dating and we know that from personal relationships. And so I think, you know, taking that analytical approach and looking at that and being smart about it, but also combining it with what we call probably more the artistic or personal side of sales, I think is really, really important. That we don't, I mean, we have a chance now because this is such a unique environment that we're in, but I think more regularly reps should take a step back and be looking through their pipeline, looking at losses, but also looking at wins, right? And like looking, what was the process that you took when you closed that suite sale? What was the process that you took when you closed that individual buyer sale, and creating patterns that you can replicate more consistently?
There's a report that we had built at my last company when I was at Core that I think highlights this perfectly. It's one of my favorite reports. And it was actually not necessarily a very analytical report. It was an interactive dashboard about wins and losses. And essentially you could see your breakdown of wins, losses, and what's still open in a certain time window. And you could see a little bit of a timeline, but you can, all right, let's take a look at last month, or let's take a look at a person or a campaign, and you'd click into it and it would show you a little more detail. And then you could click into the wins and losses and you could see, all right, start looking back at your notes, and you could go through, all right, here are a bunch of wins that I had recently. What do these have in common? And you go back and you kind of click through and it would show you, it's a very interactive report. Again, this isn't necessarily like, there's no projections or anything here, but it was a great training tool. And when I showed this report, I would show it to managers and be like, use this for your one-on-ones.
100%.
Like, sit down side by side. Like, who are the 5 people that you lost this week where you were shocked you lost them? Like, why? And let's look at them, and let's look at the wins, and let's have that conversation. It's the same report, and you would just flip it between win or loss, and you could drill down. And I think it's something you could do in yourself. It's something you could do as a manager or to one-on-ones as a training tool. But I just really loved it because of how interactive it was, and it was very self-reflective.
Yeah, it's 100% right. I think a lot of times we talk about a lot of the softer sales skills, the urgent objection handling, or what we think we're good or bad at, and we don't think enough about what's the process that we're taking, what are the patterns that we're seeing. Your process is taking 10 days to close a sale, whereas other people's is taking 5 days to be able to close the sale. What do we need to do to shorten what you're doing, because you're losing way too many sales giving people air and oxygen and time? And I think that gets me to probably the last thing I'd like to discuss too is a pipeline, because I think that means different things to different teams and organizations. They think about it very differently, but the one thing that I would say is almost across sports, and there are teams that do a good job with pipeline management. I would say the bulk of teams, garbage in, garbage out is a great way to describe a pipeline. So what is a pipeline to you, and what can a rep learn from having an accurate pipeline on a minute by minute basis, not just daily or weekly or monthly?
I will say consistently, I have seen, looking at in my past jobs or with customers I've worked with, the people that tend to their pipeline the best, even if you don't necessarily think it's the most accurate thing from the purposes of a forecast, they also have the most revenue. They tend to be at the top of your leaderboard consistently. So even before you think about pipeline accuracy, the more time you put into tracking, here's who's interested in these products, what stage am I at the process, how likely do I think this person is to close, The funny thing is, if I didn't give you a pipeline, those are all the things that like reps would try to track on an Excel sheet on next to their computer on Post-it notes anyway.
For the record, the pipeline management document I use is an Excel document that I was given in 2005 that still works incredibly well for me. So yes.
It still works, but that's the thing. But all of those same fields. So if there's a gap, if there's a gap between what you want to track in that spreadsheet versus what you're tracking in a CRM system, then that's a gap. That's something you need to resolve in the collaboration between sales and CRM and BI, because you need to make sure it works for people and you need to be receptive to feedback and make those adjustments. It's a pipeline. There is no one magic pipeline structure for an organization, right? What's your rating system that you prefer? Hot, warm, cold, percentage? Like the analyst is always gonna be like, I want percentages, because if I have percentages, I can do a revenue forecast prediction. Most people can't think in, all right, is this person 75% likely to close or 90% likely to? No one can think that way.
Yes.
So it's about, so first off, it's making sure the system works operationally more than anything else. Because at the end of the day, the most thing I care about in my pipeline is that it's helping someone close more sales. An analyst can hopefully, over time, once you get some consistency in your pipeline, can help you convert, all right, warm and this stage, if I look back, converts 45% of the time, right?
Yep.
A rep is not going to put 45% on it. Maybe I can figure out what the 45% is later. So to me,
sorry, I want to cut you off, because I think what you're saying right now is maybe the most important thing that a manager can hear out of this conversation. Like, I think we've done a lot of really great stuff for reps, but I think this is critical for managers to hear. We need to do a better job of providing definitions for like, let's just use hot, warm, cold, because that's what I use personally. Like, I have hot, warm, cold, but like, I don't have one warm at like, in my having an estimated value of like 33%, and I don't have one at 27%, right? Like, I have standardized what hot, warm, cold means. So I take out of it, and there's definitions to what they mean, like literal definitions, not numerical definitions. Mm-hmm. So it takes away a young sales rep who has no idea what they're doing, going at like, well, I think this one's going to close at 74%. And then we're constantly we're putting people in that shouldn't be in. We're constantly over percentagizing people, like, and it creates a very, very bad tracking system, using your own words.
Yep. So the first thing I want to make sure is that we have the language that means something to the sellers, because I want them to use their pipeline. If they're not using their pipeline and it's being tracked elsewhere, I'm done. The whole thing is now garbage. Yeah. So it's got to be functional first of all before it has any forecast value. So whatever you decide on for comfortable, you need this matrix, you need stages, and you need some form of a rating. Whatever you decide those to be, you need progress and likelihood is what you're essentially tracking. Yeah. Once you have that, again, the analyst can start figuring out what those numbers are. And more importantly, there might be the forecast. I don't want to apply 10% towards 1,000 people. And therefore it's like, it's the bottom of the pipeline or the top of the funnel. I'm not going to try to forecast as much as I am those last two stages. So you also want to create points of emphasis. Once we get to this rating or this stage, this is when we need to ask a little more of you as a seller, because this will help us. These are the pieces we will actually attempt to use to predict how are we going to do. So, I don't even look at close date until we're in this stage, right? Yep. So it's about not making it feel overwhelming. It's about essentially, as you advance, yes, there's a little more that we're going to need because there's a little more that we can use. And at that point, that little bit more might start to become more accurate than what it would be much earlier in the pipeline.
Yeah. And what can an accurate pipeline tell a rep on a consistent basis? Because I think, we've talked about the pipeline itself, but what can an accurate, consistently used pipeline tell a rep about themselves? I mean, the answer could probably fill in like 3-hour podcast, but very, very quickly, when a rep gets there, what can an accurate, consistently used pipeline do for them?
An accurate pipeline, one, at the end of the day, the better you are at actually managing your pipeline, simply put, you're going to know how much money you're going to make.
Yes.
Like every organization is different. The ratio of commissions and base, like, I like to I put things into dollars and cents. If I feel confident in my pipeline and especially again, the later stages when things are starting to be more real, when you can put some things behind it, you can say, all right, I feel pretty confident in certain numbers. And then you can balance that out with, when do I really need new leads? I can tell you on the CRM side, the worst one thing that would drive you crazy is I need new leads. I need new leads. And you'd go back in and you'd have a pipeline that's all over the place or things that aren't contacted. Like, you're not going to get new leads until like you actually show like, yes, I've worked this, these are in this state. Like, you need to, it's a little bit of the game. Like, you need to make sure you're using what you get. If you don't have that, you're probably not going to get the more leads that you want to begin with. So actually figuring out what you're going to make, figuring out where your best opportunities are, learning about yourself. Like, man, my pipeline looks really good on groups, but I'm struggling here. Why am I struggling? And the why, ultimately, it's about figuring out what the questions are. There isn't one magic answer as to why. It could be a lead problem. It could be a sales process problem. But essentially, it's identifying the things that are good and the things that are problematic and letting you do something about it.
And I think that's the most important point. It allows you to have proactive conversations with business intelligence, with your direct manager, with your vice president, as opposed to just getting to the end of the month and being like, whoops, I missed my goal. Like, you can have those proactive conversations where you actually give yourself a chance. And what's really funny is, I've had 850 people write into the site to request content on my website. And I bucket them whenever I get them to try to understand time management is half the requests I get into the site. It's not, the number one isn't objection handling. It's not creating urgency. It's not selling through group links. Half the questions I get into the site are focused on time management, just because I think a lot of it is reps don't have a fundamental understanding of what do I need to accomplish today, yep. Which is exactly what a clear pipeline is able to tell them. If my pipeline says I'm going to be successful this month and I'm in a good place, then I need to spend time closing those leads out and making sure they get across the finish line in the timeline I'm going to say. If I'm looking at it and saying, oh crap, I'm not even close, like that may be the day that I've got to pick up the phone and unfortunately make the 150, 200 phone calls to try to make sure that I'm reinvesting in getting people on board.
And this is where you absolutely need a feedback loop between sales and whoever's on the BI side, the CRM side. I'll give you a great example, because sometimes on the BI side, we think something is the most clean thing. Great. You set a follow-up date. I can make things as quick and couple of clicks as possible. But one of my reps came up to me and said, hey, this is great, but I don't know. I'm worried I'm scheduling too many follow-ups for the same time. Like, how can I want better visibility of what my next 30 days looks like. So I know, can I actually call them next week or do I got to push this off further? I'm like, that's a great question. I didn't think to put that there. So, but the feedback loop was awesome. It's like, all right, how about I do this? How about I put this little widget on your dashboard and it'll show you the number of calls per week you have scheduled for yourself for the next 4 weeks or 5 weeks. And like, yeah, that's great. So, you have multiple windows up. Everyone's used to kind of the multi-screen environment, but now, once he's done enough follow-ups, he goes, I think I've got, I know I'm going to have new calls to make, but he kind of has this is my capacity for what I think I can schedule for myself on a given week. Now I can manage my next 4 weeks properly and not get behind. So that's, again, and I would not have gotten to that part of the experience unless I'd gotten the feedback directly from the seller.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. And that constant conversation, for the reps that don't have a business intelligence department, make sure you're having that conversation with your manager, whoever's assigning you the leads, and being very open and honest with the feedback that you get in a very proactive way. Whether or not you have BI is just so critical, because most reps a lot of times don't want to rock the boat or they don't want to seem needy. But at the end of the day, it may give us more work. But if it's a matter of a rep being slightly more efficient, man, that adds up so much at the end of the year. Like, I talk about this in a lot of my sales trainings. If you're just a little bit more efficient and you close 1% more, if you make yourself a better salesperson and your close rate goes up 1% more, that's a lot at the end of the year. Like, when that adds up and it accumulates, it may not seem like a lot that day or that week. But when you start looking at it a month down the road, 2 months down the road, a year down the road, that stuff adds up in an incredibly significant way that I think sales reps are looking for the magic bullet that takes them from a 3% close to a 25% close overnight. And it's way more about the accumulation of really little things that you can do that will eventually get you to, man, if you were at a 3 and you become a 6, you literally doubled your revenue across the course of a year. And I think those are things that we need to do a better job of teaching reps to look for.
Yeah, I think the theme here is all these different ways of efficiency. The ROI, if you're in a team and you're trying to think, man, like I would love to have this here, and how do I justify spending money on something like that? And it's often hard to kind of find some of those top line numbers of like, oh, we're magically going to make X more money. But, efficiency generates an ROI because you apply your time to things that are revenue generating more often and avoid spending time on things that aren't. So very minor impacts on all those different types of efficiencies definitely generates revenue. You spend time on the things that make you money.
Yeah. And again, I think I would say, and you can feel free to agree or disagree with this. I think, as you said at the beginning, I think organizationally and departmentally, I think we've gotten better from an intelligence standpoint in the sports business industry. I think we've really closed the gap on a lot of different industries out there, but I still think there's a significant room for improvement when we look at our reps individually. And I think that's the next big opportunity for teams. Because like, man, if we can make every rep just a couple percentage points more efficient, that is a seriously significant amount of revenue at the end of the year.
Absolutely.
All right, Russell, listen, I appreciate this. I love the art of sales, but man, there's certainly a baseball GM in me somewhere that loves the analytical side of all this stuff too, and finding those efficiencies and becoming really smart. So I appreciate you jumping on board and entertaining that side of my love too.
No problem, man. Like I said, always happy to talk shop. These are conversations me and you have had for many years.
Yes.
So hope something in there is helpful, and good luck to everyone out there.
I'm sure it will. Thanks, man.
Take care.